Welcome back. Today's video deals with an impactful kabuki play, Tokaido Yotsuya Kaidan. In the last video, I already talked about quite a few things that happened during the Edo period, but the Edo period also saw the creation of kabuki, a type of theater less formal than No, but just as important. In fact, both No and kabuki, as well as another famous Japanese theater form, bunraku, can all be found within the Japan-related section of the representative list of the intangible cultural heritage of humanity compiled by UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. Just so you have an idea of the magnitude and cultural importance of these forms of theater. Now, within the world of Edo period kabuki, there were many supernatural stories, some of which have repeatedly been turned into plays to this very day, such as Sarayashiki plays or Kasane plays. Sarayashiki plays were based on a kaidan usually called Bancho Sarayashiki. The title can be translated as the manner of the plates at Bancho, Bancho being a certain area of Edo. The origin of this story is not entirely clear and various versions exist, both of the kaidan itself and of the kabuki plays that are based on it, but they usually deal with a servant called Okiku who gets punished for breaking one of her master's 10 precious plates. There also are versions where someone else breaks a plate and then she gets accused of it. As punishment, she gets thrown into a well but returns as a vengeful spirit and haunts the family, usually by counting from 1 to 10 before letting out a horrible scream. Kasane plays also come in variations, but often deal with a woman called Kasane who becomes disfigured and is eventually killed with a sickle but returns as a vengeful spirit. They were inspired by a somewhat different and fairly complex legend that will be too long to recap here though. Now, as far as kabuki is concerned, Sarayashiki and Kasane plays can certainly be considered important milestones, but eventually a kabuki play appeared that would tower above all the other kaidan-related plays, namely the kabuki play Tokaido Yotsuya Kaidan. It was written by Tsuruya Namboku IV and was first staged in 1825. The title means the ghost story of Yotsuya and Tokaido, Tokaido being the Edo period highway between Edo and Kyoto. Hereafter, it will simply be called Yotsuya Kaidan, as that is a common way to refer to this play. When Yotsuya Kaidan was staged, which happened over 200 years after the beginning of the Edo period, Kaidan had already become firmly established as a rich source of entertainment, so this play was certainly in great company. Interestingly enough, it was the first kabuki play to actually use the word kaidan in its title. Now, today, when people hear the words Japanese horror, many immediately think of malevolent female ghosts with long dark hair. Sadako from The Ring probably being the prime example. And it is true that this has become a typical image, a staple of Japanese horror, a recurring theme or motif even, if you will. But how exactly did this come to be? That was actually one of the topics I was most interested in when I started research for my graduation thesis, and we will look into this in greater detail in the next video. But I can already say here that Yotsuya Kaidan played a major role in spreading and popularizing this particular image, because this play featured a tragic female vengeful spirit with long black hair that was so impactful and terrifying that it pretty much became the model for Japanese vengeful spirits back then. You could almost call her the Sadako of the Edo period. Her name, however, wasn't Sadako, it was Oiwa. The plot of Yotsuya Kaidan is fairly complex, but the parts that are relevant for us mostly deal with Oiwa and her husband Iemon, who is an all-around terrible and selfish character. Through a conspiracy by another woman called Oume and Oume's grandfather, Oiwa is given poison disguised as facial cream, which instantly disfigures her, even causing one of her eyes to droop. Her husband, Iemon, has already been horrible to Oiwa ever since she became sick after the birth of their son, and upon seeing what has happened to her, he's not perhaps worried for his wife or anything, no. He is simply disgusted and decides to fabricate a reason for divorcing Oiwa so he can marry Oume. He actually tells Takuetsu, who was once a brothel owner and is now one of Iemon's servants, to rape Oiwa so that he can divorce her for adultery. Takuetsu cannot bring himself to do this and instead hands Oiwa a mirror. This is the moment when she realizes for the first time what has actually happened to her. Oiwa is shocked and devastated, and then, in a famous nightmarish scene, she tries to hide her disfigurement, but when she combs her hair, it just falls out in clumps with blood dripping to the ground. She finally learns of Iemon's betrayal and his plan to marry Oume, which causes her to become hysterical. She ends up puncturing her throat with a sword in an accident, and thus Oiwa dies, but only after cursing Iemon with her last breath. Thereafter, in what would actually count as perfect contemporary J-horror movie manner, her vengeful spirit keeps reappearing again and again and again, haunting and tormenting Ieamon in numerous ways, even tricking him and causing him to slay Oume and Oume's grandfather, who were responsible for her disfigurement. At the end of the play, Ieamon sees no other way out but to flee to a hermitage in the mountains, but he is just about as safe from her there as he was everywhere else, which is to say, not at all. In the end, he cannot even tell the difference between hallucinations and reality anymore, and is eventually slain by another character of the story. Now, this play, Yotsuya Kaidan, turned out to be a huge success back then. Not only did it fit perfectly into the long-going and still strong Kaidan boom at the time, but it also was a remarkable play for various other reasons. The whole performance was originally a 2-day play mixed with a kabuki version of Chushingura, a famous story about the vendetta of 47 ronin that avenged their master, and it was advertised as a sort of commentary on Chushingura. In a way, Yotsuya Kaidan questioned Chushingura's idealistic portrayal of loyalty while depicting the hardship of Edo period women by focusing on a female vendetta. In that respect, it must have also resonated with women back then who certainly didn't have as much power as men. It also challenged earlier Edo kabuki traditions because earlier plays that dealt with revenge would often end with a more fulfilling sense of closure, but in Yotsuya Kaidan, no honor is truly restored. You could even say that Oiwa doesn't actually get her revenge in the end because it is not her but someone else who finally slays Ieamon. I mean, the fact that he was eventually slain surely could be considered as a satisfactory ending as far as she is concerned, but I still found it striking that it isn't Oiwa herself who deals the finishing blow in this vendetta. Another break from earlier kabuki plays is how Yotsuya Kaidan used expectations and turned them on their head. There is, for instance, a term called kamiski, which refers to scenes in which a woman tends to her lover's hair, combing it while talking about her love for him. With this in mind, the famous combing scene in Yotsuya Kaidan where Oiwa combs her own hair after having been abandoned by the one who should love her, only to have the hair come off in bloody clumps, feels like a clever mockery of such established kabuki scenes. The play was also widely praised for the use of sophisticated effects and stage tricks that were utilized to make the terrifying character of Oiwa even more memorable. A few examples. Soon after Oiwa's death, Ieamon kills one of his former servants, a man called Kohei, for trying to steal a certain medicine. Ieamon then orders his lackeys to nail Kohei's corpse to one side of a door and Oiwa's corpse to the other side. Then he orders them to throw the whole door into a river. Later, there's a scene where Ieamon is at a river when this very door drifts down in front of him. He approaches the door and pulls it towards the bank of the river, when suddenly both Kohei's and Oiwa's corpse come to life, one after another on each side. But the thing is, both Oiwa and Kohei were played by the same actor, and a clever trick with a revolving panel was used, which is referred to as toi tagaeshi, which could be translated as a revolving sliding door. The way it worked was that each side of the door prop had a life-sized doll of the respective character, so a life-sized Kohei doll on the one side and a life-sized Oiwa doll on the other, but both dolls had no heads, and instead there were holes for the head of the actor playing both of them, so he could switch from one to the other when the door was turned around. Other examples are the above-mentioned famous combing scene with Oiwa's blood-soaked hair coming off on stage, or a scene where she was actually floating, or various scenes depicting how Ieamon started to see her face in everything. A famous example of this being a lantern that burns down and turns into Oiwa's face. This particular lantern scene also became the focus of various paintings, such as this famous painting from Katsushika Hokusai from approximately 1830. By the way, this is the same guy that created the incredibly well-known Great Wave off Kanagawa picture. A revolving door trick, a floating ghost, various objects turning into Oiwa's face, continuously haunting Ieamon in new ways. Such effects must have been quite a sight to behold for the audience back then, and could very well be likened to nowadays special effects in horror movies. All in all, there were probably many factors that contributed to Yotsuya Kaidan's huge success, but one thing is clear: it was a very impactful play that would influence creators of horror entertainment for many years to come. And as I said before, it also contributed to the popularization of female vengeful spirits in Japanese horror, but that is a topic we will look at in even more detail in the next video. I hope to see you then. Take care and goodbye.